Inside Graceland, one rule governed everything. Elvis Presley's daughter's nanny watched for years as staff vanished overnight for breaking it, not with anger or shouting, but with chilling silence. The rule protected something deeper than privacy. It revealed a father's desperate fear. What was the one boundary at Graceland that no one dared cross? The woman who watched in silence. She was 91 years old when she finally decided to speak. For 50 years, she had kept the secrets locked inside her heart, buried beneath layers of time and loyalty. But age has a way of loosening tongues, and the woman who once cared for the most famous child in America knew her story would pass on with her if she didn't tell it now. Her name doesn't matter. History forgot her long ago. She was simply the nanny, invisible among the glittering chaos of Graceland. Graceland. Even now, the word makes her close her eyes. Most people see it as a mansion, a monument to rock and roll royalty. But she saw it differently. To her, it was a kingdom with invisible walls, where love and rules tangled together like vines around iron gates. Beautiful, suffocating, magical, terrifying. She arrived in 1971, a young woman with steady hands and a quiet nature. They like quiet people at Graceland. Loud voices disturbed the king. She was hired to care for Lisa Marie, a tiny girl with dark hair and enormous eyes who didn't yet understand that her father was worshipped by millions. Elvis Presley. The name alone could fill stadiums, but inside those walls, he was just daddy. She watched him cradle Lisa Marie against his chest, singing softly in that voice that made the whole world weak. He would dance with her across the white carpet, making her giggle until she hiccuped. In those moments, he seemed ordinary. Almost, but Graceland was never ordinary. The house breathed with strange rhythms. People came and went at all hours. Music thumped through walls at 3 a.m. Laughter erupted from rooms she wasn't allowed to enter. And everywhere, always, there was watching. The staff watched each other. Elvis watched everyone. And she, the nanny, watched it all while pretending to see nothing. She learned quickly that Graceland had its own gravity. Everything orbited around Elvis, his moods, his needs, his unspoken wishes. When he was happy, the whole house sparkled with joy. When he was dark, shadows crept into every corner, and people moved like ghosts, afraid to make a sound. Love lived in that house. Real, fierce, overwhelming love. But so did something else. Fear wasn't quite the right word. It was more like reverence mixed with caution. Everyone adored Elvis, but they also knew, without ever being told, that disappointing him meant exile. She noticed it first with the other staff members, how they would suddenly disappear, their rooms emptied overnight, their names never mentioned again, not fired with anger or shouting, just gone, erased, as if they had never existed at all. The rule, she heard whispers about it in the kitchen, fragments of conversations that stopped the moment she entered, something about what you could do, what you couldn't do, lines you didn't cross, not ever, not even once. She didn't understand it then. Not fully, but she remembers the exact moment everything became clear. It was a Tuesday afternoon, sunlight streaming through the windows, Lisa Marie napping peacefully in her arms. She heard voices raising from downstairs, tense but controlled. Then silence, heavy, absolute silence. When she came down later, someone was gone. A woman who had worked there for years, who had laughed at breakfast that very morning. Now her belongings were packed, her car pulling through the gates, and no one would look the nanny in the eye. That's when she knew. This wasn't a normal household. Normal families argued. They forgave. They moved on. But Graceland didn't work that way. Here, there were invisible lines drawn in invisible ink, and crossing them meant vanishing into silence. The rule. It had a name, though no one dared speak it aloud. And soon, she would learn exactly what it meant. The rule that hung in the air. It had no name on paper. No one ever wrote it down or posted it on the wall, but everyone who stepped through the gates of Graceland knew it as surely as they knew their own heartbeat. The rule was simple, absolute and unbreakable. Never touch Elvis Presley. Not a handshake that lingered too long. Not a pat on the shoulder. Not even a casual brush of fingers when passing him something. You kept your distance, always. The space around him was sacred territory. and crossing into it without invitation meant you were done. The nanny learned this within her first week, though no one explained it directly. She noticed how people moved around Elvis like water flowing around a stone. They would lean in to speak, but never quite close enough. They would laugh at his jokes, but their hands stayed firmly at their sides. Even his closest friends maintained that invisible barrier. She watched one afternoon as a new cook, eager and friendly, reached out to touch Elvis's arm while telling a story. The gesture was innocent, warm, and meant nothing but kindness. But the room went silent. Every person froze. The cook's smile faded as she realized her mistake, her hand dropping away like she'd touched fire. Elvis said nothing. He simply smiled, nodded, and walked away. The cook was gone by evening. That was how it worked. No shouting, no drama, just quiet removal, swift and final, like pulling a weed from a garden. By the next morning, someone new would fill the empty space, and life would continue as if nothing had happened. The nanny kept her hands to herself after that. When she handed Lisa Marie to Elvis, she made sure their fingers never touched. When she needed to speak to him, she stood back far enough that there could be no accidents. It became second nature, this careful distance, this constant awareness of where her body ended and his space began. But it wasn't just the staff who followed the rule. Everyone did. Family members, old friends, famous visitors who came to Graceland in expensive cars. They all knew. Somehow, they all understood, without being told. She wondered sometimes how it started. Had Elvis demanded it? Had someone touched him wrong once, invaded his space in a way that made him feel unsafe? Or had the people around him created this invisible cage, believing they were protecting him when really they were isolating him? The strange thing was, Elvis himself seemed both protected and trapped by it. He could reach out, touch anyone he wanted, but no one could reach back. It made him powerful and lonely at the same time. The nanny saw it in his eyes sometimes, late at night when he held Lisa Marie. The way he would press his daughter close, hungry for that connection, that warmth. With her, he could be touched. With her, the rule didn't apply. She was the only person in Graceland who could grab his face with sticky fingers, pull his hair, climb all over him without consequence. Lisa Marie was his escape from the invisible walls. But even she would learn about boundaries. She would eventually discover that Daddy's world had different rules than everyone else's. The nanny remembers it clearly. Lisa Marie was 3 years old, running through the house with the fearless energy of a child who believed she owned every room. A guest had arrived, someone important whose name the nanny had forgotten. Lisa Marie, curious and bold, had grabbed the woman's hand and tried to pull her toward Elvis. The woman resisted, gently but firmly, keeping her distance even as the child tugged. Lisa Marie looked confused. Why wouldn't this lady come say hello to Daddy? Why was everyone always so strange around him? That was the moment. The first crack in her innocent understanding. The beginning of her learning that her father, whom she loved more than anything, lived inside rules that made no sense to a child's heart. And the nanny, watching from the doorway, felt something break inside her chest. Because what kind of world teaches a little girl that her father cannot be touched? Elvis, the father, not the king. Behind the closed doors of Graceland, away from the cameras and screaming crowds, Elvis Presley became someone the world never saw. He became Daddy. The nanny watched him transform every time he entered Lisa Marie's room. The tension would melt from his shoulders. His famous smile would soften into something real, unguarded, and achingly tender. He would drop to his knees, arms wide open, and his daughter would launch herself into them, like he was the only safe place in the universe. And maybe, for her, he was. Elvis played with Lisa Marie in ways that surprised the nanny. This man who commanded stages and owned mansions would spend hours on the floor building block towers just so his daughter could knock them down, laughing hysterically each time. He made silly voices for her stuffed animals. He let her put bows in his hair. He carried her on his shoulders through the gardens, singing made-up songs that would never be recorded, but mattered more than any hit single. In those moments, he wasn't the king of rock and roll. He was just a father who adored his child with a fierce protective love that bordered on desperation. The nanny began to understand something important. The rule, that invisible barrier around Elvis, wasn't about ego or power. It was about survival. Elvis lived his entire public life being grabbed, pulled, touched, and claimed by strangers. Fans tore at his clothes. Women threw themselves at him. Crowds pressed so close he could barely breathe. His body wasn't his own out there. It belonged to everyone who wanted a piece of him. So, inside Graceland, he created a different world. A world where he controlled who came near, who touched him, who entered his space. It was the only place he could breathe, the only place he felt safe. And Lisa Marie existed inside that protected bubble with him. The nanny saw how carefully Elvis guarded his daughter's world. He controlled who could hold her, who could speak to her, who could even look at her for too long. It seemed extreme to outsiders, but the nanny understood. Elvis knew what fame cost. He knew how it consumed everything in its path. He was determined to keep that hunger away from his little girl for as long as possible. Late at night, the nanny would hear him in Lisa Marie's room, whispering to her while she slept. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was always the same: promises, protections. A father trying to build walls strong enough to keep the world out. But Elvis was also afraid. The nanny could see it in his eyes when Lisa Marie ran too far ahead in the yard, when she laughed too loudly with someone he didn't fully trust, when anyone suggested taking her somewhere beyond his sight. He was terrified of losing her, not just physically, but emotionally. Terrified that the same world that had swallowed him whole would eventually come for his daughter too. So, he held tight. Maybe too tight. The rule that protected him also created a strange kind of prison, and Lisa Marie lived inside it without understanding why. The nanny wondered sometimes what would happen when Lisa Marie grew older, when she started asking questions, when she wanted friends, wanted freedom, wanted a life beyond these golden gates. What would Elvis do then? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. It started with whispers. Photographers lurking outside the gates, reporters calling with questions about Lisa Marie, strangers who claimed to be family friends suddenly appearing, wanting access, wanting photographs, wanting stories they could sell. The pressure was building. The outside world had discovered that Elvis Presley had a daughter, and they wanted her. Elvis felt the walls closing in. His protective instincts went into overdrive. The staff received new instructions, stricter schedules, more restrictions. The rule became even more rigid, extended now to anyone who came near his child. But you cannot keep the world out forever. Not when you're Elvis Presley, not when your daughter carries your famous name. The first real threat came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, disguised as something harmless, and everything the nanny thought she understood about the rule was about to change. When outsiders pushed too far. The Tuesday started like any other. Lisa Marie ate breakfast in her high chair, smearing jam across her face while Elvis laughed and wiped her clean. The sun poured through the windows of Graceland, making everything feel warm and safe. But outside the gates, something was shifting. The nanny noticed the cars first. They had always been there, parked along the street, fans hoping for a glimpse of Elvis. But now there were more of them, different kinds. Not teenagers with cameras, but adults with notebooks, professional photographers with long lenses, reporters who didn't leave when security asked. They weren't there for Elvis anymore. They were there for his daughter. Lisa Marie Presley was becoming famous without ever leaving her home. Magazines wanted her picture. Newspapers wrote stories about the king's little princess. Strangers called the house pretending to be relatives, trying to get information about her daily routine, her favorite toys, and what she looked like up close. Elvis felt it like a storm gathering on the horizon. The nanny saw the change in him. He stopped smiling as easily. He checked the windows more often. He asked questions about everyone who came to visit, people he'd known for years, suddenly suspicious of their intentions. The rule tightened around Graceland like a fist. Then came the visitor who pushed too far. She was the wife of someone important, a business associate Elvis couldn't easily refuse. She arrived with expensive gifts and a bright smile, complimenting everything she saw. Elvis was polite but distant, his jaw tight in that way the nanny recognized as warning. The woman asked to meet Lisa Marie. Elvis hesitated, then agreed, but his eyes never left her. The nanny brought Lisa Marie downstairs, holding her hand. The little girl was shy at first, hiding behind the nanny's legs, peeking out at the stranger. The woman cooed and clucked, calling Lisa Marie precious, adorable, such a little doll. Then she did something nobody expected. She reached out and grabbed Lisa Marie's face with both hands, squeezing her cheeks, pulling her forward for a closer look. The room stopped breathing. Lisa Marie froze, confused and frightened by the sudden touch. The nanny's heart hammered in her chest. Every person in the room felt the violation like a physical shock. But it was Elvis who truly shattered. He didn't yell, he didn't move quickly, but something in his eyes went dark and cold, something the nanny had never seen before. He stood up slowly, crossed the room in 3 long strides, and placed himself between the woman and his daughter. His voice when he spoke was quiet, terrifyingly quiet. He asked her to leave, and just like that, no explanation, no second chance. The woman stammered, confused, trying to laugh it off as harmless affection. But Elvis didn't move, didn't smile, didn't soften. Security appeared at the door, as if summoned by telepathy. She was escorted out within minutes. Lisa Marie started crying, not understanding what had happened, only knowing that something bad had occurred. Elvis scooped her up, holding her so tightly the nanny worried he might hurt her. But his hands were gentle even as they trembled. He carried his daughter upstairs without a word. The nanny stood in the empty room, her own hands shaking. She finally understood. The rule wasn't about power or ego or control. It was about terror. Pure, raw terror that someone would take something from Elvis he couldn't bear to lose. His privacy, his peace, his daughter. Fame had already taken so much from him. His freedom, his anonymity, his ability to walk down a street without being mobbed. And now it wanted Lisa Marie too. It wanted to touch her, photograph her, own little pieces of her, until there was nothing left that belonged just to him. The rule was a wall, but walls only work if people respect them. And the world was pressing harder every day, cracks forming in places Elvis couldn't see. The nanny cleaned up the toys scattered across the floor, her mind racing. She thought about that woman's hands on Lisa Marie's face, how casual it had been, how thoughtless, how easily it could happen again. Upstairs, she could hear Elvis singing to his daughter, his voice thick with emotion, trying to soothe both of them. But the nanny knew something had changed. The rule had been tested and nearly broken. Elvis had won this time, but he looked shaken in a way she'd never seen, and she couldn't help wondering, what would happen the next time someone pushed too far? What would happen when Elvis couldn't protect her anymore? The day the rule was broken. It happened on a Sunday in spring, the kind of day that should have been perfect, with flowers blooming in the gardens and Lisa Marie playing outside in a yellow dress that made her look like captured sunshine. Elvis was hosting a small gathering, just close friends, people he'd known for years, people he trusted. The nanny remembers thinking how relaxed he seemed that morning, almost like a normal father having a normal party. She should have known. Peace never lasted long at Graceland. One of the guests brought someone new, a cousin visiting from out of town, a man in his 30s with an easy smile and friendly manner. Elvis greeted him politely, but kept his distance, the way he always did with strangers. The nanny noticed how Elvis's eyes followed the man around the pool area, watching, measuring, calculating risk. Lisa Marie was 4 years old by then, old enough to be curious about new people. She toddled over to the stranger, bold and fearless the way children are when they don't yet understand danger. The man crouched down to her level, speaking kindly, making her giggle. The nanny was nearby, close enough to intervene if needed. Elvis was across the pool, talking with someone, but constantly glancing toward his daughter. Everything seemed fine, safe, controlled. Then it happened so fast the nanny almost missed it. The man, laughing at something Lisa Marie said, reached out and ruffled her hair. A casual gesture, affectionate, thoughtless. The kind of thing adults do to children 1,000 times a day without thinking. But then his hand moved down. Not inappropriately, not with any ill intent the nanny could see. Just a gentle touch on her shoulder, steadying her as she wobbled on the pool edge. On Elvis's daughter. The nanny's breath caught in her throat. She looked immediately toward Elvis. He had gone completely still. Not frozen, but utterly motionless in a way that felt dangerous. His face showed nothing. Absolutely nothing. But his eyes had turned to ice. The man didn't notice. He was still playing with Lisa Marie, completely unaware that he had just crossed a line carved in stone. Elvis moved then, Not quickly, not aggressively. He simply walked around the pool with deliberate steps, each one measured and controlled. When he reached Lisa Marie, he picked her up without a word, settling her on his hip. Then he looked at the man. The nanny has never forgotten that look. It wasn't anger. Anger would have been easier. This was something colder, emptier, final. Elvis spoke quietly to his friend, the one who had brought the cousin. The nanny couldn't hear the words, but she saw the friend's face drain of color. Within 5 minutes, both men were gone. The party continued, but the air had changed. Everyone felt it. That invisible shift when something sacred has been violated. Lisa Marie squirmed in Elvis's arms, wanting to go back to playing. But he held her tighter, his knuckles white against her yellow dress. He carried her inside, away from everyone, away from the sunshine and laughter. The nanny followed at a distance. She found them in Lisa Marie's room. Elvis was sitting on the floor, his daughter in his lap, rocking slightly. He wasn't crying, but his breathing was uneven, like he was fighting something inside himself. Lisa Marie kept asking what was wrong. Why did Daddy look sad? Why did those men have to leave? She didn't understand. How could she? She was just a child who had been touched on the shoulder by a friendly stranger. But Elvis understood. He understood that the world wanted to touch his daughter. That people felt entitled to her because she carried his name. That nowhere, not even inside his own home, was truly safe. The rule had been broken, not maliciously, not even consciously, but broken nonetheless. And Elvis, who had built his entire private world around protecting that one boundary, felt the walls crumbling. The nanny watched him hold Lisa Marie, watched him struggle to explain something he couldn't put into words. How do you tell a 4-year-old that she lives inside a cage built from her father's fear? That the rules protecting her are also imprisoning her? You don't. You just hold on tighter and hope it's enough. After that day, everything changed. New security measures appeared. Fewer visitors were allowed. The guest lists became shorter. Elvis stopped hosting parties at Graceland almost entirely. The house that had once buzzed with people and music grew quieter, smaller, more isolated. Lisa Marie felt it even if she couldn't name it. The nanny saw her looking out the windows more often, watching other children play in yards beyond the gates, asking questions about friends, about school, about the world outside. And Elvis, trapped between his love for his daughter and his terror of losing her, pulled the walls closer still. The rule had been broken, but the real tragedy was what happened next. After the silence fell. The house changed after that spring Sunday. Graceland, which had always felt like a kingdom of contradictions, became something quieter and sadder. The music still played, but softer now. The laughter still came, but less frequently. And Elvis, the man who had once filled every room with his larger-than-life presence, seemed to be slowly disappearing into himself. The nanny watched it happen day by day, year by year. She saw how the broken rule had broken something inside Elvis, too. He became more protective, more vigilant, more impossibly careful about who could come near Lisa Marie. The invisible barrier around his daughter grew thicker, higher, until it felt less like protection and more like imprisonment. New security guards appeared at the gates. Cameras were installed in places they hadn't been before. Every visitor was questioned, screened, and watched. Even family members found themselves subject to Elvis's scrutiny in ways that made them uncomfortable. The nanny heard the whispers, the complaints, the confusion from people who loved Elvis but couldn't understand why he was building walls so high. But she understood. She had seen his face that day by the pool. She had watched him hold Lisa Marie like she might evaporate if he loosened his grip even slightly. Fear does strange things to love. It twists it, tightens it, turns tenderness into control without anyone meaning for it to happen. Lisa Marie was growing older, 5, then 6, then 7. Old enough now to notice that her life was different from other children's lives. She would watch television shows where kids went to parks and playgrounds, where they had friends who came over without appointments, where their fathers didn't inspect every person who walked through the door. She started asking questions. Why couldn't she go to regular school? Why couldn't she have friends over whenever she wanted? Why did Daddy always look so worried when people came near her? Elvis never knew how to answer. He would deflect with humor, distract with gifts, promise her trips and adventures that would make up for the isolation. But the nanny saw Lisa Marie's eyes grow more thoughtful, more aware. Innocence was slipping away, replaced by a quiet understanding that something about her life wasn't normal. Elvis himself was changing in ways that frightened the staff. He looked tired more often. His smile, when it came, seemed to require enormous effort. He spent long hours alone in his room, the curtains drawn against the Memphis sun. His health became a topic of whispered concern among those who cared for him. The nanny understood what she was watching. A man being slowly crushed by the weight of his own fear. Elvis had spent his entire adult life being consumed by fame, having pieces of himself torn away by crowds who loved him but didn't see him as human. And now, watching the same hungry world circle his daughter, he was trying to hold back an ocean with his bare hands. The rule remained absolute, stricter now than ever before. No one touched Lisa Marie. No one got too close. Staff members were dismissed for infractions so small they seemed absurd to outsiders. A hand placed on Lisa Marie's back to guide her through a door, an arm around her shoulders during a photograph. Each violation met with the same quiet, devastating response: removal, silence, disappearance. The house grew quieter still. Fewer parties, fewer visitors, fewer moments of joy breaking through the careful control. Graceland began to feel less like a home and more like a beautiful, expensive cage. The nanny knew her time there was running out. She could feel it in the air, in the way Elvis looked at everyone with increasing suspicion, even those who had been loyal for years. One evening, the nanny found Elvis alone in Lisa Marie's room, sitting in the rocking chair where he used to sing his daughter to sleep. Lisa Marie was older now, nearly 8, and didn't need lullabies anymore. But Elvis sat there anyway, in the dark, staring at nothing. He spoke without turning around, his voice rough and tired. He said he was scared of losing her, scared of the world taking her the way it had taken everything else from him. The nanny didn't know what to say. There was no comfort that could reach the depth of his fear. Elvis passed on when Lisa Marie was only 9 years old. The nanny had left Graceland by then, but she followed the news, watched from a distance as the little girl she had cared for became an orphan, thrust suddenly into a spotlight she had been protected from all her life. Over the decades that followed, Lisa Marie struggled with relationships and the weight of a famous name. The nanny saw echoes of Graceland in every story. The rule that had governed Lisa Marie's childhood had followed her into adulthood, shaping her trust and her understanding of love. Now, at 91, the nanny finally speaks because she wants people to understand. Elvis Presley was not a tyrant. He was a father terrified of loss, trying desperately to protect the one pure thing in his complicated life. The rule was never about control. It was about fear. Fear that the world that had devoured him would devour his daughter too. Was he right to enforce it so strictly? The nanny doesn't know. Love and fear were so tangled together in that house that separating them became impossible. But she knows this. Elvis loved his daughter with a fierce, desperate, overwhelming love. And that love, however imperfect, however suffocating, was real.